Your players are expecting Darth Vader in plate mail, a terrifying force of nature to be held in awe, but somehow you give them Dark Helmet, a bumbling troublemaker that inspires more humor than dread. They don't take them seriously. They certainly aren't afraid of them, and worst of all, they are only engaging with them because it's what their character has to do, not what they, the player, wants to do. Let's build a better BBEG. So how do you make your villains scary? Add a bunch of teeth, give them a scary voice. Maybe they have a really cool name. I don't think you really need any of that. I believe that a truly scary villain is a competent one. Think about it. If your villain has never won an encounter against your players, why would they be afraid to face them again? If your villain has never succeeded at any of their plots since level 1, why would your players worry when they have a new evil plan to take over the world at level 10? If your villain never makes good on their threats, why would your players be moved to action when they threaten a beloved NPC or a city or really anything at all? This creates a bit of a tightrope for the DM. If your villains never win, they aren't a threat. But if they win too much, it's not going to be any fun for the players. We can't just give the BBG victories either. It has to be won and it has to mean something for the story. So how do you walk that tightrope and also do it in a way that's fair and fun? Let me show you how I make a tier 1 BBG as an example. This is Tony Gabaghoul, an undead gang leader. How do we take this goofy little guy and make him a name that your players will dread? First off, you need to treat your BBEG as a faction, not a regular NPC. What this means is your BBEG may be a singular being, but their influence and power is not. Even for a tier 1 campaign villain, they are going to be a powerful figure in their city, town, or region, a gang leader, a noble, the leader of a guild or cult. They have followers at their disposal. They can hire mercenaries, bribe officials, and call in favors, all to stop your party without ever leaving their lair or stopping their plan. To define this, I borrow a bit from Mausritter. I'm going to give 2 to 4 open-ended resources that make sense for his position. He's a gang leader, so he must have gangsters that he leads. They aren't going to be unlimited, but since he's undead, he might be able to make more. He could extort local businesses for gold, so he has money, probably enough for an extravagant lifestyle and to be able to easily bribe local guards and officials. Because he is part of the criminal underworld, he probably also has criminal contacts all over the city that can send him information. Finally, he's undead, so someone had to have made him. So for the last resource, we can say he had a secret patron that he can call on for help. This is fun because that patron could also be another BBEG later on in the campaign. These resources are important because they create a power gap that your players now have to overcome, and they demonstrate that the villain is a multifaceted and capable threat. How do we use these resources in play? Here's an example. A local shopkeeper is tired of being extorted by Tony Gabaghoul and hires your party to scare off his undead goons. This should be an easy encounter for the party. Just a few skeletons or zombies here to pick up some money, so how do we use Tony's resources to subvert that expectation, make him seem like a more serious threat? I actually have 2 ideas for this one. The first idea I have is that the players absolutely wreck those undead goons, but before they can celebrate, the town guard appears asking about the commotion. Tony Gabaghoul has money as a resource, so we could say he used some of it to add these guards to the payroll. And instead of thanking the party for their good deed, they threaten the shopkeeper with serious jail time if they don't hand over the payment, maybe plus a little extra for their troubles. Then they leave, giving Tony Gabaghoul's regards. The second idea I have is that Tony, through his criminal network, has gotten word about this shopkeeper trying to hire heroes instead of paying him up. And instead of bribing some guards, he's going to send his usual pickup crew with torches and alchemist fire to burn the place down and make it an example for the other shops in the area. Both of these ideas heighten the stakes and establish that Tony Gabaghoul has connections and is dangerous. He will put the players in a position that even when they might win, others around them might lose. The second tip that I have is that you need to give your BBEG understandable, definable, and specific goals. Take over the world is not very specific. It might be the end goal, but what are the steps to get them there? This helps twofold. When the goals are revealed to the characters, the stakes become clear to your players, and it makes it easy to establish how they can interfere. Going back to Tony Gabaghoul, his overarching goal for this arc is to introduce a new drug to the city and use the money to take over the criminal underworld of the city, and to do that, he needs a few things. His first goal is that he needs startup capital. That's why he's extorting all of these shopkeepers. His second goal is that he needs to source materials for his new drug. Could be mundane or magical. Maybe he's setting up grow ops in a nearby forest or doing deals with Underdark merchants. Tony's third goal is that he needs to find a trained workforce. Alchemists from the region might be disappearing, or maybe the party's favorite potion maker is being blackmailed. Tony's final goal is he needs to eliminate his competition. He might be starting a gang war, or even starting peace talks with the other rival gangs in the city. All of these goals can be easily established with rumors, or can be given directly from a captured goon. They're also relatively open-ended, which allows your players to come up with creative solutions on how they want to handle it. And if Tony succeeds in any of these goals, they also lead to new resources that are now at his disposal that he can use against the party or the city. Tracking these goals is really easy if you use the Mausritter rules. Each goal has anywhere between 2 and 5 progress pips, depending on their complexity. Between each session, we choose a goal and then roll a d6. We then add the number of resources that Tony has at his disposal onto that number. On a 4 or 5, he makes a meaningful step towards his goal, and we fill in a single pip. On a 6+, he has a big breakthrough, and he fills in 2 pips. If your players interfere with the goal, they can remove 1 to 3 pips depending on what they do and how they do it. It's also possible with enough effort that they could temporarily halt or completely destroy that goal altogether. My third tip is to establish that your BBEG is working on their goals and dealing with the party simultaneously. Tony Gabaghoul has resources and followers at his disposal. He doesn't have to focus on one thing at a time. This naturally creates a situation where your players are going to have to choose what to deal with and what to ignore. This creates tension. Do they try to free the imprisoned alchemists, or they try to stop the gang war in the streets of the city? Or has Tony set up a situation completely outside of his goals to distract them? It's important for you as the DM to remember that those ignored goals can progress unhindered unless they did something previously to give Tony a setback. It's entirely possible while they were trying to stop one goal, he succeeds at another and makes their situation even more dire. This establishes for your players that their actions or lack of them will have consequences. Let's do another example of what this might look like. While your players were trying to find the location of these missing alchemists, Tony was able to win his gang war and has now consolidated his power in the city. He now has more goons at his disposal than ever. This can seem a little unfair since Tony has a lot of momentum towards his goals and your players can only really focus on one thing at a time. But you have to remember, the player's end goal isn't necessarily to pick apart Tony's operation into oblivion. It's to slow him down, level up, and gain their own resources for the inevitable epic final confrontation to stop him once and for all. My fourth tip is don't get in the way of your BBEG's success. Sometimes the dice aren't going to be on your player's side, and the only reasonable path forward is that the BBEG is going to win this round. My advice to you is to let them. Don't cheat your players out of a comeback or revenge plot. They are so much fun. Don't get me wrong, I'm my player's biggest cheerleader. I always want them to succeed, but failure moves the story forward too, and you need to establish some low points for them so they can relish the high points later in the story. What I'm not saying though is to TPK your party at the drop of a hat. There's a lot of ways for your party to lose that doesn't necessarily end with everybody dying. You can give them opportunities to escape, you can have allies save them, or really whatever makes sense narratively in the moment, but just remember that death isn't the only option for losing. We want our players to understand that victory and success are not guaranteed. This is what makes the stakes that we set up as DMs matter. Let's do an example of what this will look like in practice. The party went out into the forest to find one of Tony Gabaghoul's grow operations, where he cultivates a rare psychedelic moss that's key to his new drug. The grow op is set up in an old abandoned fort and is well protected with undead, and Tony used his resources to hire a rival adventuring group to patrol the area. The party decides that sneaking in is their best option, and they wait for nightfall, but in their setup phase, they all failed their stealth checks. It would be really easy as a dungeon master to just give them a pass or give them a slight hiccup, but you have to fight that urge. What we're going to do instead is we can tell them that nobody seems to have noticed their approach and that they seem to have gotten away with it. In actuality, that rival group is setting up an ambush, and when they enter that abandoned fort, they are going to be immediately surrounded. The party can surrender, fight, or attempt to flee, but there's little to no chance they're going to destroy that moss. And they've also become known to Tony Gabaghoul. We've also established some minor villains for them to deal with in the future, all in one swing. My final tip for building your BBEG better is to hit them where it hurts. When establishing your villain, don't pull your punches and never go back on your threats. For a loss to be meaningful, it has to be more than just symbolic. It could be a scar, a lost item, NPC, you might even kill a player character, but the loss has to have consequences. Just don't go overboard. A little goes a long way. Let's do another example of what this might look like in play. The party has been captured. Their belongings have been taken from them and they've been put inside the old cells in the fort. It's been a day or two without food or water, so they've also taken 2 levels of exhaustion. After many long hours, they are brought out into the dining hall to see the undead man himself. Tony Gabaghoul, eating a large meal with the rogue's favorite knife. He asks them to sit, and he has an offer for them. He is willing to let them live and set them free on the condition they stop their little crusade and they work exclusively for him. He says if they agree, nobody else has to get killed, but if they deny him or try to cheat him in any way, he will send them back to their cell and will kill another shopkeeper. The players, if they're paying attention, might ask what he means by another, which will cue Tony to reveal that he has killed the original shopkeeper that hired them all those weeks or months ago. Now, if your safety tools allow this and you really want to drive it home, you can reveal that Tony is aiding that shopkeeper. He is a ghoul after all, and it will make him seem like a true monster. He can then card out an NPC that the players care about and give them some time to think it over. From there, they can try to escape and the story can continue, but you've just established Tony as a serious threat that is aware of who they are and who they care about. The adventure really writes itself from there. Just be careful when your BBEG is in physical proximity to your players now, because they will 100% try to murder him. Now that your players truly hate your BBEG, it's going to be fun creating situations where they don't have access to violence to deal with them. It's going to be really the only way that you can sustain the tension without one side killing the other, and you want to keep all of that alive until the big showdown. This is by no means the only way to make a villain engaging and scary, so if you have your own BBEG secret sauce, let me know in the comments, and if you're interested in more Dungeon Master tips, check out my other videos, and until next time, roll well, be well.